cold here. I just had to share because we're in the middle of an extreme cold snap here. It's lasting for about a week, and it's currently, with the wind chill, it feels like -44, which is -50 Fahrenheit. So I am so thankful to have a warm house and even a fireplace to keep us toasty warm, and that there is no real reason that I need to go outside. So I am very thankful for that, but I just thought I needed to share with you just how freezing it is. Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is a recommendations video for March Mystery Madness. In this recommendations video, I'm going to give you some book ideas for the prompt weather. So I thought it was very apt to just let you know the extreme cold that we are currently experiencing here in Saskatchewan. Okay, but let's just move straight on into the books. I'm going to include a link to my March Mystery Madness playlist in the cards where you can see my other recommendation videos, and I hope that you will check those out. And so we are going to start with a book that has the word weather in the title. Now, this one isn't technically a mystery, but it's the only book I have that had the word weather in the title, and I can make it work. So this is Heavy Weather by P.G. Wodehouse, and this was from 1933. It is one of his Blanding series, so it is set in England. And the reason I can make this work is because there are certain mysteries happening in here. Someone is trying to steal Empress the Pig, and someone else is also trying to steal a manuscript or something. And a detective does get hired, Percy Pilbeam, proprietor of the Argus Private Inquiry Agency. So I thought I can eke it in and make it work. Alright, and my Christie commendation for this prompt is Taken at the Flood. This was published in 1948, and it is a standalone. Gordon Clode is killed in an air raid on London. He has left no will, and his vast fortune passes to his young wife, Rosaline. So this is set during during the war or just after the war. But 5 other people have been promised a share in that fortune. 5 people who desperately need the money. Now it can only become theirs if Rosaline should happen to die before them. There are 5 people with a strong motive for murder, and violent murder is committed. But Rosaline is not the victim. Alright, and let's get into some historical mysteries here that fit the prompt weather. He Shall Thunder in the Sky by Elizabeth Peters. This was published in 2000, and it's the 12th in her Amelia Peabody series. I really enjoy this series. They're witty and entertaining, and the characters are just so great in this series. Trouble is brewing in Egypt at the close of 1914, and no one will escape the fury of the tempest to come. With the world around them at war, Amelia Peabody and her husband Radcliffe Emerson have returned to Cairo for another season of archaeological excavation, despite the increasing danger of an attack on the Suez Canal and on Egypt itself. A terrible conflict looms. A long-simmering love affair is resolved. A dastardly plot twists like a serpent writhing in the desert sun. There is no escaping the onrushing hurricane that now threatens the Emersons and their world. So Amelia plunges right into it. So not only does it have a weather term in the title, it has a couple of them in the synopsis as well. Alright, The Virgin in the Ice by Ellis Peters. Now, ice isn't itself weather, but ice is caused by cold weather, so I'm totally counting it. This was published in 1982, and it is the 6th Brother Cadfael mystery. Winter 11 39. Brother Cadfael's tranquil life in the monastery gardens at Shrewsbury is once again interrupted by violent, mysterious happenings. Raging civil war has sent many refugees fleeing north from Worcester, among them 2 orphans of a great family and their companion, a nun. But they seem to have disappeared somewhere in the wild winter landscape of frost and snow, and Cadfael sets out to find them. And then another in the Cadfael series, but a different type of weather altogether. This is The Summer of the Danes by Ellis Peters, published in 1991, and it is the 18th Brother Cadfael. In May 1144, an envoy comes from the Bishop of Lichfield to the Benedictine Abbey of St. Peter and St. Paul in Shrewsbury, and requests the services of Brother Cadfael as his interpreter on a journey to the newly revived 4th Welsh diocese of St. Asaph. Not at all averse to a change of scene, Cadfael welcomes the invitation, but neither man anticipates what an eventful errand it will turn out to be. For at the royal seat of Aber, they learn that a Danish mercenary fleet has been sighted approaching the Menai Strait, and as if that were not enough, a young girl goes missing and a corpse is discovered. Can I also say that I absolutely love these editions? I only have 2 in my collection of Brother Cadfael mysteries that are like this, but I would like to find more because I think these are just fabulous. Okay, and then we have Wolf Winter by Cecilia Ekback. This was published in 2015. Swedish Lapland, 1717. Maya, her husband, and their 2 daughters arrive from their native Finland, hoping to forget the traumas of the past and put down roots in this harsh but beautiful land. Above them looms Blackison, a mountain whose dark history haunts the lives of those in its shadow. While herding the family's goats on the mountain, Maya's elder daughter, Frederica, stumbles across the mutilated body of one of their neighbors. The community dismisses the death as a wolf attack, but Maya feels certain it was murder. Compelled to investigate, Maya is drawn into the history of tragedies and betrayals that have taken place on Blackison. Frederica is pulled toward the mountain as well, feeling something no one around her seems to notice. Then, the harshest winter in memory, known as a wolf winter, descends upon them. Struggling to survive, the settlers are forced to come together, and as the snow gathers, their secrets are laid bare. Soon, Maya will discover the true cost of survival under the mountain and what it will take to make it to spring. This is a Canadian author, Cecilia Ekback, is a Canadian author. She now lives in Calgary, but she was born in a small town in northern Sweden, and her parents come from Lapland. Continuing with the winter theme, we have Killer in Winter by Susanna Gregory. This was published in 2003, and it is the 9th chronicle of Matthew Bartholomew. Christmas, 1354. And in Cambridge, the winter is as bad as anyone can remember. But however cold the weather gets, for 2 individuals it is about to get even colder. A drunken attempt at blackmail by Norbert Tulliet, errant scholar of the Franciscan hostel of Oving, leaves him dead at the hostel door. And in St. Michael's Church, a second unidentified body holds an even greater mystery. For Matthew Bartholomew, the murderers would be difficult to solve at any normal time of the year. But now he has a further serious distraction to deal with. Philippa Aubigny, to whom he had once been betrothed, has returned to Cambridge with the man she left him for, the merchant Sir Walter Turk. Bartholomew hopes that the couple's stay will be brief, but he is about to be sorely disappointed. For not only does the mysterious body in the church turn out to be Walter's servant, but events conspire to ensure that Walter will never leave Cambridge again. More winter. This is The Dead of Winter by Rennie Airth. This was published in 2009, and it is the third in the John Maiden series. On a freezing London night in 1944, Rosa Novak is brutally murdered during a blackout. Scotland Yard suspects the young Polish refugee was simply the victim of a random act of violence. They might have dropped the case if former police investigator John Maiden hadn't been Rosa's employer. Maiden feels he owes it to Rosa to find her killer. Pushing the investigation, he stumbles upon the dead girl's connection to a murdered Parisian furrier, a member of the resistance, and a stolen cache of diamonds. But with all of Europe ravaged by the war, can Madden find the killer before he strikes again? And one last in the historical category, The Wicked Winter by Kate Sedley. This was published in 1995, and it is the sixth in her Roger the Chapman medieval mysteries. During the chills of winter, Roger the Chapman relishes the freedom of his calling. Journeying west, he finds himself following in the footsteps of an itinerant preacher, Brother Simeon, whose sermons are the talk of the countryside. Roger, who's met the friar before and finds his zeal wearying, is less than enthused when they meet beneath the roof of Cedarwell Manor, where Simeon has come to pray with Lady Cedarwell and Roger to sell her his wares. But Lady Cedarwell is in no state to receive either man, for scarcely have they arrived when she is found dead, the circumstances of her demise strangely fulfilling the prophecy of a babbling hermit Roger had met on the road. Suddenly, the friar and the chapman are united in their aim to discover the truth behind the death at Cedarwell Manor. Okay, and then I have a couple of cozies to recommend to you. Aunt Dimity Snowbound by Nancy Atherton. This was published in 2004, and it is the 9th in her Dimity series. These are set in England, and the main character is an American who has moved to England. When Laurie Shepherd decides to treat herself to a relaxing day hiking through the serene English countryside, she has no idea that the blizzard of the century is about to hit. The storm comes quickly and furiously, but fortunately Laurie is able to find refuge in nearby Ladythorne Abbey, the fabulous home of the late Lucasta de Klerk. Soon she's safe and dry, along with 2 other stranded backpackers. But has she escaped one danger only to fall right in the middle of another? In the Abbey's cloisters and passages still lingers the haunting presence of Lucasta, the mysterious madwoman who spent the last years of her life locked up alone in the Abbey. And Laurie must also deal with the threat of an unstable caretaker who lurks around every corner. And Agatha Raisin and the Day the Floods Came by M.C. Beaton. This is from 2002, and it's the 12th in her Agatha Raisin series. A woman dressed in a wedding gown and still clutching her bouquet has just been found floating in the river. Police say suicide, but Agatha suspects the flashy young fiancé. So again, a flood in itself is not a weather term, but it is caused by weather, so I'm counting it. Okay, and now I have some vintage crime, classic crime, golden age crime to recommend to you. Clouds of Witnesses by Dorothy L. Sayers. This was published in 1926, and it is the 2nd in her Lord Peter Wimsey series. A man is found shot, and the Duke of Denver is charged with his murder. Naturally, it is his brother, Lord Peter Wimsey, who is called in to investigate the crime. This is a family affair, for the murdered man was the fiancé of the sister of Denver and Wimsey. Why then does the Duke refuse to cooperate with the investigation? Is he really guilty, or is he covering up for someone? Why is Wimsey attacked by an enraged farmer on the lonely moors? Why is an attempt made on his life in a Soho street? No Wind of Blame by Georgette Heyer. This was published in 1939. Tragedy befalls the Carter family following an eventful visit from a Russian prince and a scandalous blackmail letter. The murder of Wally Carter generates a bewildering mystery. How does one shoot a man crossing a narrow bridge without being near the murder weapon when it is fired? London Particular by Christianna Brand. This was published in 1952. And a London Particular is kind of a nickname for fog, and it's specifically the kind of fog that they got at the time in London. Christianna Brand's own description of London Particular is as follows. It is set in a London house and everybody is either a member or close friend of the family. It is a doctor's house, a Regency house in Maida Vale. In fact, it is my own house with all my own family and animals and things in it just for fun. There is a very naughty little lovely called Rose who gets into trouble while at finishing school in Switzerland. A French gentleman called Raoul Vernet flies over from Switzerland to have a talk about Rose's goings-on there. He arrives to dinner during a real pea souper and being left alone for a short time is later found dead in the hall, the telephone receiver clutched in his hand, and having been batted on the head with a thing called a mastoid mallet. All parties concerned have been scattered about in the fog, conveniently minus alibis. Inspector Cockrell comes into the story and also my London detective, Mr. Charlesworth. There is a very considerable slice of Old Bailey murder trial in it, and all that I can think of further to say is that most of the people are nice. I mean, it is one of those ones where the critics write and say afterwards that all of the people are much too charming ever to have committed murder, as if I hadn't made them up and wasn't the one to know whether they would commit murder or not. Murder in the Snow by Gladys Mitchell. This was published in 1950 and it's the 23rd in her Mrs. Bradley series, and it is also called Groaning Spinney. Mrs. Bradley, sharp-eyed detective and celebrated psychiatrist, has decided to spend Christmas with her nephew at his beautiful house in the Cotswolds. It isn't long before a mystery unfolds. There are strange events occurring in the nearby wood, and local villagers are receiving anonymous, threatening letters. Then the snow begins to fall, and a body is discovered. In Spite of Thunder by John Dickson Carr. This was published in 1960, and it is the 20th in his Dr. Gideon Fell series. Brian Innes has been asked to see young Audrey Page when she arrived in Geneva and to detain her from joining the strangely temperamental group of people at the Villa Rosalind. With characteristic stubbornness, if not trusting naivety, she goes and is immediately encircled by terror, while the jaws of a murder trap swing closed. Fortunately, Dr. Gideon Fell is on hand, and when the murderer strikes with an invisible weapon, Fell accepts the challenge with a brilliance and wit. So this is one of his impossible crimes, which are often connected with locked rooms. So you often get locked room and impossible crimes grouped together. Blood Upon the Snow by Hilda Lawrence. This is from 1944 and it is set in the US. I think in New York State, but I'm not 100% sure. When Mark East arrives at the elegant estate in Crestwood, his employer, Mr. Stoneman, insists that he is engaging East only as a private secretary. But why is Mr. Stoneman so frightened? Why does their melancholy hostess, Laura Morey, keep to her room? What secret is little Anne Morey hiding behind her tight-lipped, solemn face? Then, when a woman dies in a mysterious fire and a housemaid suddenly disappears, East discovers that some passions cannot be buried under a peaceful blanket of snow. Thunder on the Right by Mary Stewart. This is from 1957. Jenny is astounded to hear that her beloved cousin Gil, Jill has entered a convent and travels to the untouched beauty of the Pyrenees to search for an explanation. But a mesh of intrigue awaits her arrival, and Jenny must throw herself into a dramatic and dangerous search. The Mists of Fear by John Creasy. This was published in 1955, and it is set in Spain. She was beautiful, and in her red dress she was the most conspicuous thing in sight. A light mist gathered around her. She was gone, and near the place where she had been standing, a molten pit appeared. Incredible, yet there were a dozen witnesses who saw it happen. Dr. Palfrey, working on the case, finds he is pitted against an enemy who can kill silently, swiftly, and anonymously. His life is in danger, and perhaps even the fate of the world hangs in balance. Very traumatic. Okay, let's get into some police procedurals or private detectives. This is Dead Cold by Louise Penny. It is published in 2006, and it is the second in her Armand Gamache series. It is also called A Fatal Grace. These are set in Quebec in Canada. Deep winter, and an electrocuted body lies in the snow beside a frozen lake. A cloud of footprints around it. It's the perfect crime. No witnesses, no clues. But when Chief Inspector Armand Gamache starts to untangle the victim's troubled past, he discovers a secret history filled with enemies and dark secrets. As a bitter wind blows across the landscape, something even more chilling is sneaking up behind Gamache. Season of Snows and Sins by Patricia Moyes. I absolutely love this title, and I think it would be great for the bonus prompt of picking a book that you picked simply because of the title. I absolutely love this. Season of Snows and Sins. This is published in 1971, and it is the 10th of her Inspector Henry Tibbet series. Henry and Emmy Tibbet are on holiday in the picturesque alpine village of Montaraz when a popular ski instructor is murdered, apparently by his long-suffering wife, who was distraught over his affair with Giselle Arnay, the French film star. Yet the jet-set crowd with whom Giselle shares a ski chalet seem almost too anxious to see the young widow found guilty, leading Henry to suspect something more than adultery may have been the real motive for the crime. Soon, not even the sparkling layers of snow can conceal a deeply buried scandal that involves some of the most powerful people in French society. Death in Springtime by Magdalene Nab. This was published in 1983. It is the third in her Marshall Guarnacchia series. Sorry. This is a series set in Florence. Snow in March. Such an unusual event in Florence that no one, not even the marshal himself, noticed the two foreign girls being driven out of the city at gunpoint. One was released almost immediately. The other, a wealthy American, vanished without trace. The search turned to the Sardinian shepherds in the Tuscan hills, a close-mouthed fraternity at the best of times, which this certainly was not. But this was no straightforward kidnapping, as the marshal discovered. The outcome was as unexpected as snow in March, or death in springtime. A Touch of Frost by R.D. Wingfeld. This is the second in his Inspector Frost series and was published in 1987. Now, this series you could also use for the person prompt because Frost is the name of the detective, but frost is totally an indication of weather, so that's why I am including this one here. Jack Frost, Denton Division, is not beloved by his superiors. In fact, he is something of a pain in the brass, unkempt and unruly, with a taste for crude humor and a tendency to cut corners. They'd like nothing better than to bounce him from the department. The only thing is, Frost's the only DI who, by hook or by crook, always seems to find a way to get the job done. I love this series. Jack Frost is such a great character, and these are always such interesting books. So in A Touch of Frost, though he's officially on duty, Frost is looking for the nearest opportunity to sneak off to the departmental booze-up celebrating a colleague's retirement. But the normally sleepy town of Denton is not cooperating this cold autumn night, leaving Frost wading in his best suit through a flooded public restroom to investigate a junkie's death. And from there, things start to go seriously downhill as Frost winds up stalking a runaway teenager, a one-man burglary wave, a local member of Parliament's bad seed son turned hit-and-run driver, and the tabloid's new criminal darling, the Hooded Terror, who is about to strike his next victim. Poor Jack Frost is always so overworked. Death in a Cold Climate by Robert Barnard. This was published in 1980. Murder on the Rocks. Suddenly, the frigid town of Tromsø, which was one of the hottest spots in Norway. It all began when Professor Mackenzie's dog started sniffing around in the snow and uncovered a human ear, attached to a stark, naked corpse. After 3 months on ice, the trail was as cold as the climate. But Inspector Fagermo refused to give up. He soon discovered that the death of a stranger was just the tip of the iceberg, and that beneath Tromsø's frozen surface lay a dangerous conspiracy of blackmail, espionage, and cold-blooded murder. Okay, Cold Light of Day by Emma Page. This could also be used for the prompt time because it references day. This was published in 1983 and it is the fourth in her Kelsey and Lambert series. Everyone liked Gavin Elliott. Who would want to murder such a nice guy? Crime doesn't respect the conventions of quiet English village life. When a young, successful bachelor is found stabbed to death, it's Inspector Kelsey's job to dovetail the slim leads and airtight alibis to ultimately uncover the missing pieces in this jigsaw puzzle suspense. And the last one in this category is Mists Over Moseley by John Greenwood. This was published in 1986 and it is the fourth in his Moseley series. The tiny village of Upper Marsdale is being overwhelmed by a mischievous coven of witches. Neither believers nor non-believers can explain why the church clock winds itself up without assistance, why a row of winter cabbages is suddenly struck down in the night, or why not one cat in the village will venture forth after dusk. Mardale is the territory of the deceptively brilliant Inspector Jack Moseley, and his exasperated superiors wish he would get on with solving these nagging little incidents. But nagging soon becomes nightmarish when a sculptor is found hanging from her ceiling beam. A whiff of local corruption tickles Moseley's nose, and he and his sidekick set off into the bracing northern air to seek the reasons and parties behind both the supernatural and the homicidal. Okay, so I have one recommendation for you in the Gothic category, and that is Face in the Fog by Marilyn Ross. This was published in 1973. As the prow of the great Edwardian luxury liner Cardonia cut through the dark waters of the North Atlantic, beautiful young Julia Raymond was chilled to her very heart, not by the rain and mist and wind, but by an icicle of deadly fear. The dashing young man she loved and her adored father had turned into violent enemies of each other. Intrigue and treachery, lies and deceit seemed to poison the very air. But Julia could cope with these all too human frailties. What she had no defense for was something beyond all human explanation, a leering ghost from the shameful past who rose from the grave to kill and kill again. Oh, I love a good Gothic. I have just a few in the other category. This is Stormy Petrel by Mary Stewart. This was published in 1991. The isolated cottage on the remote Hebridean island of Moila, sorry, seemed like an ideal away from it all retreat for writer Rose Fenimore. The place where she could work in peace and where her brother Crispin could walk and fish and photograph the birds and wildlife. But it is not easy to escape the world and its troubles. Crispin's arrival is delayed, and Rose, on her own in the lonely cottage, has to cope with two very different men who come in from the sea on a night of summer storm. And then this is A Colder Kind of Death by Gail Bowen. This was published in 1994, and it is the fourth in her Joanne Kilburn series. This is a series that is set here in Saskatchewan, which is cool. When a prisoner is shot to death in the exercise yard of a Saskatchewan penitentiary, Joanne Kilburn finds herself haunted by a part of her past she wished had never happened. The dead prisoner is Kevin Tarpley, the man who 6 years earlier had brutally killed her politician husband Ian in a seemingly senseless act along the Trans-Canada Highway. The haunting takes on a more menacing cast several days later when Tarpley's sinister wife, Maureen, is discovered dead in a snow-swept Regina parking lot. A brightly colored scarf is found wound tightly around her neck, a scarf that belongs to none other than Joanne Kilburn. Soon this single mother, author, university professor, and TV show panelist is deemed the #1 suspect in Maureen Tarpley's demise. And then The Flood by Ian Rankin. This is the very first book that he published in 1986. And it is about Mary Miller, who is an outcast. As a young girl, she had fallen into the hot burn, a torrent of warm chemical runoff from the local coal mine. Fished out, white-haired, and half-dead, she was initially treated with sympathy. But all that changed when the young man who pushed her in died in an accident down the mine just 2 days later. From then on, she was regarded with a mixture of suspicion and fascination by her God-fearing community. Now, many years later, she is hardly less alone. She is the mother of a bastard son, Sandy, and caught up in a faltering affair with a local school teacher. Sandy, meanwhile, has fallen in love with a strange homeless girl. But the search for happiness isn't easy. Both mother and son are gradually being forced to come to terms with a dark secret from Mary's childhood. So there you have it. There are some recommendations for you for the weather prompt. This one is slightly more difficult than the others, and so I hope you found something here that is intriguing to you, or it sparked a memory of a book that you have on your shelves. I would love to know what you're going to read for the weather prompt, so let's chat in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.